Hi, my name is Lisa Deanne Smith. I am the senior curator at On-Site Gallery and also the curator of our current exhibition titled Power. Power is a group exhibition featuring 7 artists and designers, and the prompt for the exhibition was to take the word power and resituate it from its normal context, which is extractive and often colonial based or influenced by capitalism, state capitalism, and reposition it through the power found in care, in community and respectful relationships, in bringing forward non-Western knowledge, often traditional indigenous knowledge from many different cultures, and really challenging the hierarchy that was brought forward in a lot of Western culture, particularly from Cartesian thought up, of binary systems and hierarchies that place humans at the top above all other creatures and the planet Earth. So Cartesian thought split things into mind and body, black and white, good and evil, and often prioritizing one over the other. So a lot of the artists and the artworks here are really interested in a view that doesn't create those types of hierarchies. And many are experimenting in different ways to situate their artworks and themselves into living beyond a Western hierarchical worldview. All of the artists have either were born in Canada or grew up in Canada, so have some influence within their lives through capitalism in Toronto and Canada, as well as the colonial context that we live in. So I'll go through each of the artists' work. One thing overall I'd like to mention is that all of these artists have come out of a looking at the world through a deconstructive lens or a critique of culture. And what I find that they're doing is they're analyzing the things within the world that have helped form them, and critiquing those that they find oppressive or not supporting them in the way that they would like to be in the world. And adding on to that critique, they're really experimenting with other ways to be in it. So they're really moving from deconstruction into a new place where they're adding in and finding ways to thrive in the world. In that kind of context, for me personally as a curator, I'm really proud to have given voice to the artists through their artworks, of course, but also through interviews where the artists get to speak in first person about their work. So actually through OCADU Live, we did interviews with all of the artists, and there's QR codes that you can click on in the show and listen to these interviews while you're looking at their work, or look at them at home, on your own time. I like to start our tour with artworks by Rocky Dobie. Rocky is a self-taught artist. He's been making works in the streets of Toronto since the late 70s. I myself first encountered his work around Queen Street area in the early 80s. And being a teenager coming downtown, I was always, the works made me feel like that there was a voice in the city that I was interested in that was outside of mainstream advertising and other things that I was seeing on the streets. So Rocky is a self-taught artist. He began doing photocopies and putting his commentary on the street, and then he's gone through many different materials. I would say it's impossible to count, but he's probably, he's done thousands of works that have been on the streets. He's worked in photocopies, he's worked in plaster casts. He's well known for taking books, especially during the 90s when a lot of bookstores were going out of business, and painting them and covering them in metal and hanging them up with chain on telephone poles and fences, and making copper plaques and having drawings and commentary on them and bolting them into different infrastructure within the streets. And also he's done murals and that type of work. His work has supported many marginalized communities. He's talked about over the years prison justice, addiction issues, indigenous issues, homelessness. He's made posters for different political things like the G20. So he's really reached out to his community and supported them through his visual art. And maybe about 20 years ago, he started doing printmaking and working within some nonprofits like Open Studio, and has began, doing works that sit in the gallery as well as outside on the streets. And I'd like to read a quote from Rocky, because I think it really summarizes how he repositions his power to care for his community, coming from a place he worked for years as a metal worker doing welding on high rises and that type of thing. And he says in one of his artworks that was on the streets of Toronto, "This violent culture enforces individuality and destroys self-sufficiency because it doesn't want us to know how much we need each other." And I've always been really impressed by how he's just been insistent on having a voice that supports marginalized communities. And I think we're going to just move over to one work that I'd like to explain a little bit. So one of the works that we've, or documentations of work that we've put together for Rocky that we're really proud of is we hired an OCAD student to go out and document many of the works that are currently on the streets of Toronto that Rocky's done, and then we've also added to that works from Rocky's archive. So on this monitor, there's 376 works of what Rocky's done out in the streets. And it's really great to see the diversity and also how they age, and so that you can enjoy them, because that's really where his practice started, was in the streets. We have made this, we had a designer student who created this Google map. So you can take a QR code and carry it with you, and whenever you're in a certain area or you're just in the mood for a bit of a treasure hunt, you can click on the QR code and it will bring you a map of the city where there's numbered and addresses that will come up that show you where to look for his works. So there's like many out there now, and we haven't captured all of them, but it's a really great resource and a fun activity. So grab one of these QR codes and do a little bit of exploring. So this is the work of Rajni Pereira. Rajni's an OCAD University grad from drawing and painting. She graduated, 10 years-ish ago now. She is an artist from Sri Lanka. She was born there and grew up in Toronto. She is really interested in using her work to address issues of climate change, oppression, racism, and she's done a lot of work in world building and looking at futurism. This body of work is a departure for her. So this is a selection of works from a body of work that she has called Vessel with Two Mouths, which means a vessel that's connecting to its spirituality as well as to the material world, and speaking through both of those mouths. So with this work, Rajni and her daughter spent time in Sri Lanka, and they really wanted to connect to the land and see how that would affect her practice. So they literally gathered clay from the ground and used it to make small sculptures, as well as grinding it up and using it as paint. They took the artworks that they made to the market in a village in Sri Lanka, and were able to work along the food vendors and other artistic vendors there and get to know the community. Rajni really connected with a spirituality called Yaku Tovil. So it's been quite repressed in Sri Lanka by Buddhist practice, and it really is a spirituality that embodies experiential knowledge as well as stories and that type of thing, and it was very much repressed in Sri Lanka, and so in her diving into and learning about this, and she brings forward in some of the works some of the myths from Yaku Tovil. It's a way of bringing back some of her DNA knowledge that sits in her DNA that was repressed through colonialism, and helps her look at the world and shift a little bit from ways that are more didactic and feel, a way of repressing people really is to take away their culture and their spiritual practices. So this was a way for her to kind of learn and gather some of that back. So this is a work called Our Math as Old as Time, and it really draws attention to under-recognized contributions to world knowledge, and a lot of that knowledge being embedded in experiential and embodied knowledge. So she has a woman here who is wearing on her head an anklet that's actually similar to a sculpture that's also in the exhibition with string on it. And if you look in her dress top, there's ceramic beads in there, there's glass beads, she's done marbling on the dress. So it's referencing that there's a lot of mathematical knowledge in ancient practices. So it comes through in dance patterns, it comes through in patterns that they used in their clothing, it comes through in beaded works, and that there's different ways to talk about math. Besides, it being within Sri Lankan practices, it's also really under-recognized in a lot of Brazilian indigenous cultures, and of course in India, where there was, a lot of mathematicians that did really incredible things that have definitely gone under-recognized. So this is her embodiment of, bringing forward dance and different crafts that really have forwarded our understanding of mathematics. This is the work of Khadija Morley. Khadija is also an OCAD University graduate from the Drawing and Painting program. She graduated in 2021, I believe. Khadija is Toronto-born of Jamaican parents, and her work in printmaking is really centered around subjectivity as a counter-narrative. She depicts Afro-surrealist dreams where magic and reality meet. Her figures in self-portrait refuse to be stereotyped. Most of the figures in here are of Khadija herself. And what I find really interesting in a lot of them is they're doing this flip, embodying a flip. It's easy to see, particularly in the images with her eyes. So the eyes are definitely looking out, but they're also draw you in and have you think about what's inside, and as well as the windows in her works. So in the windows, especially the piece called First Star, which is the piece with the star over here, it you can't tell the figure if it's standing inside the window or if it's standing outside the window. And I really enjoyed the flip that her works are doing in that way of referencing to the outside public self and her interior self. Khadija has also researched spiritual practices from her Jamaican roots. One of them specifically is called Obia, which is a way of life influenced by West African folklore, and as well as also some research into voodoo, which is often stereotyped as a negative type religion. These practices were brought to the Caribbean by enslaved Africans. Obia was outlawed in 1760 and is still illegal in Jamaica today. And again, removing Africans that were brought over to North America, you know, in understanding how they were, you know, put into North American culture as slaves, they really, you know, stripped them of all of their culture, be it religion, you know, storytelling, and that was their way of dehumanizing them. So to, you know, bring back in some of the old ways that, and I shouldn't even say bring back in. I mean, what I really find interesting about this work, and in talking to Khadija about it, there's always been a survivance of these types of practices. There has always been a way of knowing that they never let go of, and in a way, that's what Khadija is talking about when she's talking about her interiority. It's something that can't necessarily be shared with everyone. Myself as a white person, I'll never understand some of the things that are behind the scenes in Black culture. You know, certain things come through in a sense of humor, but it's not for everyone. And so I think some of the secrets, and Khadija talks about that in the work with the snake. That piece is called Secret. So it's important to draw and point to this cultural survivance that in a way was forced underground but never went away, and bring some of it back and strengthening it in our culture now with pride. So this is the work of Jamila Lowe. Jamila is an OCAD graduate from the illustration program, and she also teaches in illustration now. And mostly Jamila is known for her visual books, as well as professional illustrations that are more contracted for specific clients. And her online presence doing GIFs and things like that is pretty incredible as well. So for Power, we asked Jamila if she could do some works that reference this book called As You Wish. And what I really love about this book is it's just full of really relatable, funny moments that I feel really, with a beautiful light touch, remove a lot of stereotypes. So she has these creatures that are a little like monsters, but you can definitely tell they're from the Black community. At the beginning of the book, they're wishing on the star, and the star is really happy. And then after so many wishes throughout the book, at the end, you know, the women have aged and the star is like really exhausted and tired. So in the book, she talks, you know, about wishing for romance and wishing for, you know, this beautiful home and, you know, kind of the things that go with that. There is one image in the book that in particular spoke to me when I saw it for the first time. An image of a very tired mom on a couch with toddlers kind of biting each other. And I think that's when I really kind of got Jamila's work. I felt that experience in my body, and I feel like the topics that she's wishing for, we can all relate to them. They're all really like kind of basic things that we want. Some of it's critiquing them. You know, there's one where there's people working out and they have abs on their chest and on their back and on their arms and on their legs, and it's, you know, over the top. But I think we kind of all know that desire where we want to look like, you know, really impressive, or, you know, those moments where we, you know, just want to nap when our kids are fighting. So I think it's a very interesting way for her to have everyone be able to relate when they're looking and kind of laughing at the moments that she's depicting. But also it allows us to really not focus on some of the stereotypes that have been fed to us that help us, you know, as I mentioned in relation to Khadija and Rajni's work, you know, dehumanize cultures that we may not be really familiar with. So I think she's been really successful at doing that in such a lighthearted way. And one of the works that we're going to look at really closely is we'll look at the pencil crayon drawing that she did for this show of a close-up of the woman on the couch, because I just want you guys to see just the lightness of touch and the quality of craftswomanship that she's put in that is just, you know, kind of creates this light feeling in everyone, you know, on top of kind of her light narratives. So this is a close-up of one of the images in Jamila's book, As You Wish, and it just really blows me away to look at the craftsmanship. So this is all drawn just with regular pencil crayons, and Jamila's let me know that she starts light and then just slowly builds up the layers. And there's just something, you know, it happened with the book, and then when I look at this, my body really responds, and I love that I'm experiencing that kind of mind-body knowledge when I look at it, especially when I see like her hair going over the corner of the couch and it just getting lighter there, and then just sort of like her mouth opening and being the back of the same color as the couch. So there's just something in the craftsmanship and the bit of awe that is created that I just love how that makes me feel as a viewer. And I've watched, as I give tours to students and other visitors, you know, people are really affected by that. And I think that is one of the magic things within visual art, and pretty much every single every artist here, I would say, has this craftsmanship that gives us such pleasure, that allows us to dive into the work in a way that's an embodied experience as well as an intellectual experience. This is the work of Fiona Smith. Fiona also graduated from what was known as OCA back in the 80s, and she currently teaches in the illustration department at OCAD University and has been for quite a while now. Fiona, her work is really concerned about empowering people, often focused in a female, non-binary context, as well as children. So we have drawings here, and also we have a lot of her books. So she's well known for books that she's been illustrating and collaborating on with Corey Silverman for children, books about all about sex and different topics that are often not spoken about so much in children's books. So she tackles those subjects with Corey. And again, I've known Fiona's work since I was, I guess, my early 20s. And as a woman, I really was attracted to her work because I felt this sense of imagery and depictions of things that females, non-binary, and actually really all people feel that they're not really encouraged to express. You know, so there's in this series of work, it's called The Chimera's Daughter, and it was done in 2005. And she's depicting a world where it's populated by females, and the females are in different factions that are in power struggles with each other. And so there's fighting going on, there's violence, there's people dying. And then the world is also being hit by these crystal type meteorites, and everyone's being affected by plagues and pandemics. So it embodies, you know, a lot of kind of the symbols of oppression, really, and of things larger than humans that are out of our control, and how humans try to control them in some ways. There's this work, The Last Elephant, where this elephant's dying. So I love the combination of, you know, there's images where people are helping each other, and there's images where people are fighting each other. There's sadness, there's joy, there's fear, there's sex. So it's all embodied in these drawings, and, you know, looking at them, even without knowing the story of her world, I'm really moved by seeing feelings that normally, you know, may be expressed to a few people close to myself, but, and I, you know, I think they're universal type feelings, we all have them, but they're just not open and out in the world. And so I think about her work as really addressing emotional intelligence, as well as, of course, they're incredibly drawn and crafted. The work at the back in color is a work that she did specifically for this exhibition and in reference to this body of work, The Chimera's Daughters. Over here, we have a series of drawings. She did 2,200 drawings. She set up an agenda for herself to draw approximately 6 drawings per day for a year. Right now, we just have a selection of those drawings exhibited. So at the very upper left is the first drawing of that year, and then at the very bottom right is the last drawing. And throughout them, there's 2,200 drawings. So each day she would start with the one drawing and then put another piece of paper on top and trace them and alter them a bit, and then just drawing from her subconscious and just doing things quickly. So, and then as you'll see in the video, she scanned all 2,200 drawings, and they've turned into a kind of animation. And it's really great because, again, it really cycles through so many ways that people can express their identity, feel accepted within their bodies. I mean, when I look at them, there's just so many moments that I can relate to that, again, feel quite emotional to me, whether they be joyous or whether they be shameful or, you know, feeling scared. In particular, I really respond to this one that's just kind of like a big blob, and knowing, you know, sometimes waking up in the morning and trying to get started, and, you know, maybe things haven't gone right, or I'm worried about money, but sometimes I think we've all felt like that big blob, and it's just so refreshing to see it, you know, depicted here, alongside, you know, other images that are much more joyous, and kind of embracing the full range of emotions and not just focusing on either the bad or the good. Echo is a Ghanaian-Canadian artist, and he's really interested in awakening our curiosity and memories of childhood through using Lego as a material. He uses black Lego to talk about Black futurism. So both of these sculptures, they haven't been, you know, they're made purely from regular pieces of Lego that he's, you know, sourced. It's really great, actually, in his studio. He's got a few walls just full of drawers with little pictures of them, of Lego. So he's designed these 2 goddesses. They're goddesses depicted as when they were children. So this is Mama Wata, and this is Yamaya. And they're both water goddesses that are well known in slightly different forms across Africa. And I think what's really important about these goddesses is that they're, again, they embrace a culture that Echo is connecting with. They're also goddesses that embrace what Western culture might call, good and evil. So they're not just good goddesses, or they're not evil goddesses. The myths around them are that they support people and they bring forward a spiritual kind of underworld from the sea that feeds people, but they also can, bring bad luck if people aren't acting in the right way, per se. So often when fishermen would go out, or fisherwomen would go out, they would give food to the water to appease these goddesses. And I think it's important to note, the idea of awakening our curiosity through these works is bringing us back to a time when we were intuitively playing. And so he's really helping us bring forward that childhood experience when there was less, we were less influenced by the things in culture that, for people in Toronto and Canada, are really influenced by a colonial context and by capitalism, and help us connect where we were less formed in that way, and keep us curious and looking for ways that feel right for who we are and how we can live in a world that feels more free for us and where we're more excited for the future. So these 9 paintings here are the artworks of Natalie King. Natalie is an OCADU alumni as well, graduated from the drawing and painting program. She's an Anishinaabe artist from Timiskaming First Nation. And her works have been influenced by the Anishinaabe woodland style. And she talks about her work as coming from a context of queer, indigenous, femme energy. She wants these works to bring forward love, pride, joy, and is really interested in making sure that Two-Spirit and queer indigenous people are, inserted into a indigenous conversation of who's historically been in indigenous communities, for her specifically the Anishinaabe community. And I'm going to read a quote by Natalie, and it's such a nice way to end the tour of the Power exhibition, because I'm not an Indigenous person, but I really feel the energy from these, and I'm sure they're so supportive of people that are Indigenous. And it's such a lovely quote that she wrote for Horizons. She says, "I am mainly focused on love. Strawberries, hearts, embraces, and gentle eyes. Through painting, I show you I care. I hope all queer natives see my work and feel the vibrating colors like a grand entry in a powwow." And I just love feeling that kind of love and care that's coming out, and the celebration that she has, and a refusal to not allow herself to sit in that joy, even as she understands the history of Indigenous people in Canada, and critiques the context and their history through colonialization and genocide, really. So I just love the energy that's coming off these works that Natalie's created. So as we close out, just want to mention that there's a publication that is, if you come and see the exhibition in the gallery, they're free to pick up. It's also available online in our full length as a digital publication. Just go to our website and you'll find it there. It has more information on all the artists so that you can easily search them. It also has the QR codes for you to listen to the interviews with each of the artists, where they talk about their own work in first person, and a curatorial essay. So thanks for joining us, and I hope you see the show online or in person.